Today we will discuss role of public sector in India. Now what is public sector? Public sector is state controlled sector, controlled by the government, the authority. What is the reason of such control? The government tries to develop the economy with the help of rudimentary base of industrialization, growth of income, growth of employment, as well as the welfare. So there are several objectives of the government to develop the nation, to build the capacity of the nation. Up to 1930s, there was the supply side economics, and we rely upon the supply side. The Great Depression then came into the place, and Keynes started advocating the role of the government. So several demand management policies were advocated by J.M. Keynes. And the role of the government started, and in due course, if we see the Indian economy, we can see the active participation of the government into the economy after independence. The public sector has been prompted in India in the early stage of India's developing planning, with the expectation that it would create employment and it would be the chief driver of economic development. The public sector has been designed to shoulder the responsibility of establishing heavy and basic industries and generating resources for future investments. Subsequently, the government nationalized much sick and loss-making private sector enterprises. In the pre-independence period, there were few public sector enterprises in the country, that is owned by the government. These included the railways, posts and telegraphs, the port trusts, the ordnance factories, All India Radio, few enterprises like government salt factories, quinine factories, etc., which were under departments. So these are all departmental undertakings. Independent India embraced planned economic development policies in a democratic federal state. The country was facing problems like inequalities in income and low levels of employment. So we started with low level of income, low level of employment, and also with regional imbalances in economic development. And also we were lacking trained manpower, lacking the skill. In this particular scenario, the public sector activities after the independence were limited to the fields like irrigation, power, oil and refinery, railways, ports, air transport, communications, banks, financial corporations, heavy and basic industries like iron and steel, heavy electrical plant. While the entire field of consumer good industries as well as the entire agricultural sector were left for the private sector. So government had taken responsibility of building the rudimentary base for economic development through industrialization, through communication. The public sector has been significantly developed since independence with a view to making it a catalytic agent for the steady development of the economy. The public sector has been assigned the role of developing heavy industries and generating resources for future development. Accordingly, the total number of public sector enterprises of the central government increased from 5 in 1951 to 244 in 1990. The first one is the economic growth. So for industrial development, which is the utmost necessary for the growth and development of an economy, so heavy engineering, heavy industries are under public sector, the domain of public sector. The capital required for these industries is easily and readily made available by public sector. But it is almost impossible for the private sector to run these industries. And at the post-independence period, the public sector took the responsibility to increase the economic growth. Thereafter, the regional development. For regional development, we need the presence of public sector. Private sector usually neglects the backward areas. They won't set up their businesses in the remote areas. So the state-controlled enterprises should go there, should reach the remote areas to make the regional balance. Thereafter, the employment generation. Various public sectors operating in India needs a lot of manpower, and this provides employment to unlimited individuals according to their education, experience and abilities. Then the service motive. Public sector works for public utilities, providing public utilities to the mass. So, the service motive is another factor for the presence of the service sector. Then the monopoly. Public sector is purely a government monopoly. As we can say, Indian Railway, the public sector, having the increasing returns to scale benefit in the operation of railways. But that monopoly will not hamper the societal benefit, the welfare of the society. The revenue generated through the government monopoly will be redistributed for the welfare of the society only. So this monopoly is beneficial for the society as a whole. Thereafter, the infrastructure. Rapid industrial development in a country needs sound infrastructure. For building social overhead capital, we need public sector. Then public sector works as model employer, giving all the facilities, giving the standard wages to the workers. And proper working conditions are provided by the public sector. Then the protection of sick industries. Public sector, to prevent the sick unit from closing down, takes over their responsibility and prevents many people from getting unemployed. So retrenchment can be reduced by the presence of public sector. Thereafter, government control. Public sector is widely controlled and managed by the board of directors or other officers appointed by government. Then, economies of scale. For the large scale of production, due to huge investment, due to huge capital employed, the public sector can have economies of scale in operation. Now, the objectives of public sector. The first one is to help in rapid growth. Public sector is important for economic growth and industrialization. Create the necessary infrastructure for economic development. Thereafter, to earn return on investment and generate resources for future development. To promote equality in the economy by reducing the regional imbalances. Public sector can create huge employment. To promote balanced regional development, we need public sector. To assist small-scale industries, to promote import substitution, another very important aspect. Through import substitution, we can generate foreign exchange reserve. We can improve the balance of payment situation in our country. After independence, the time was predominantly an agrarian economy with weak industrial base, low level of savings, inadequate investments and infrastructural facilities. So all the characteristics of less developed country present in that time. In view of this type of socio-economic setup, our policymakers drew up a roadmap for the development of the public sector as instrument for self-reliant economic growth. This guiding factor led to the passage of Industrial Policy Resolution 1948 and Industrial Policy Resolution 1956. In the early years of independence, the capital was scarce and the base of entrepreneurship was also not strong enough. Hence, the 1956 Industrial Policy Resolution gave primary role to the state and state-owned enterprises. Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948 laid emphasis on the expansion of production, both agricultural and industrial, and in particular on the production of capital equipment and goods satisfying the basic needs of people, and also increasing the export so that it would increase the earnings of foreign exchange. Public sector enterprises were set up to serve the broad macroeconomic objectives. What are the broad macroeconomic objectives? Income creation, employment creation, self-sufficiency in the production of goods and services, long-term equilibrium in balance of payments. So all these objectives should be satisfied by the public sector. Now, there were only 5 central public sector enterprises with a total investment of 29 crores at the time of first 5-year plan. There were 320 central public sector enterprises in 2016 with investment of 1171,844 crore. So we can see the huge increase in the investment from the public sector. These public sector enterprises are key and strategic actors in the nation's economy. They also operate in competitive markets such as telecommunication, hospitality, etc. Now, state-owned companies are not restricted or protected by the government. They are now in the arena of competitiveness as well. So, they have to compete with private players. In telecom industry, we can see the competition amongst private and public. So, we see a kind of mixed oligopoly in the telecom market as well as in the health sector. A large number of central public sector enterprises have been set up as greenfield projects consequent to the initiatives taken during 5-year plan. Now, new strategies for public sector were later outlined in the policy statements 1973, 77, 80, 1991. 1991 can be termed as watershed year, signaling liberalization to the Indian economy. Now, 1956 resolution reserved 17 industries for public sector. The new industrial policy in 1991 reduced this number to 8. In 2001, the number was further reduced to 3. The public sector emerged as the driver of economic growth, consequent of the industrial revolution in Europe. So, in Western world also, we can see the importance of public sector. Further, in the second half of the 20th century, in the developed economies, the political opinion started fluctuating or shifting toward private enterprises, and government intervention reduced. Many eminent economists argued that government must not venture into those areas. Government should restrict itself to managing, controlling, regulating rather than provisioning of goods and services. The collapse of the socialist economy of the Soviet bloc convinced the policy planners around the world that role of the state should be that of a facilitator and regulator, not as the service provider. Public sector and private sector have become an integral part of the economy. There may not be much difference in working of these sectors in advanced countries. But in developing countries, the performance of public sector has considerable scope for improvement because we need rudimentary infrastructural base, we need social welfare, we need government support and building of heavy industries through investments. Government of India as part of national agenda to promote growth, increase efficiency and international competitiveness has been continuously framing policies for industrial growth, fiscal, trade and foreign investment to achieve the overall socio-economic development of the country. The government realized that a strong and growth-oriented nation could be built if India grows as a part of the world economy and not in isolation. Now there are few reforms, progressive reforms under new economic policy. Reduction in industrial licensing, reforms in monopolies and restrictive trade practices, reduction of areas reserved exclusively for the public sector, disinvestment in equality and selected public sector enterprises, enhancing the limits of equity participation. Now, reform measures are taken for PSUs as well. The public sector will focus on strategic, high-tech and essential infrastructure areas. PSUs that are essentially safe are to be considered for reconstruction. To encourage resource utilization of PSUs, a part of shareholding of PSUs will be given to mutual funds, financial institutions and general public and to the workers, which is known as OFS, giving shares or equity to the eligible employees. The board of PSUs will be made more professional and given more power and autonomy given to the public sector to work efficiently. Now, strategic public sector enterprises, this concept introduced in 1999. Arms and ammunition and allied items of defense equipment, defense aircrafts and warships, these are coming under the public sector. Atomic energy, nuclear power, these are all coming under public sector. Thereafter, the railway transport. Industrial policy has been seen a sea change with the most central government industrial controls. Industrial controls liquidated and CPSC, that is Central Public Sector Enterprises, were identified in 5 areas: arms, ammunition, defense, atomic energy, railway, transport. Now, government policy towards public sector enterprises as contained in the National Common Minimum Program to devote full managerial and commercial autonomy to the successful and profit-making enterprises, public sector enterprises. Thereafter, generally profit-making companies will not be privatized. Every effort will be given to modernize and restructure public sector companies. Chronically loss-making companies will either be sold off or closed. Private industry will be inducted to turnaround. Privatization revenues will be used for socio-economic welfare purposes. Public sector companies and nationalized banks will be encouraged to enter the capital market. So, for the construction of better organized capital market, money market, we need again the public sector, and government is also promoting that. Now, the performance of the public sector. The overall public sector performance has shown improvement. Overall net profit increased. Overall contribution increased in employment in income generation. Central government organizations are giving dividends, interest, corporate taxes and excise duties as well. So, these are all beneficial for the economy as a whole. In next 10 years, we will see high amount of capital expenditure coming in the public sector. Up to 2014, the capex, that is the capital expenditure on the railway, was very low, but it is increasing continuously, and we are trying to build up the railway infrastructure. New public sector enterprise policy Atmanirbhar Bharat was notified on February 2021. The policy intends to minimize the presence of government in the PSEs. Under the new PSE policy, public sector commercial enterprises have been classified as strategic and non-strategic. Again, 4 broad areas specified: atomic energy, transport and communication, power petroleum, coal and other minerals, banking, insurance and other financial services. We can see the disinvestment process reinstated in several public sector enterprises.